Yeah.
You can chirp me, Mattel.
If anything,
Elsie, you can't chirp me because that would hurt you. A chirp from Elsie would derail this conversation. One of Elsie's just sharp, you know, concise, like right to the point, like Aaron Rubber compensating. No, it's weird because you were like, you sent me a voice note. Because, like, we haven't seen each other in a long time.
Like, I literally don't know. I feel like it was on our reunion. If you were even there.
Oh, I was there.
Okay, we'll say.
I was there, baby.
We all went going out.
But, like, because of, like, Instagram and stuff, like, I feel like we stay in touch, kind of. But then you sent me a voice note, and you were laughing in it. And your laugh, like, opened up this box of, like, high school in me. And then I started to get all this, that's the one right there. That's the laugh right there. And then I was looking through Facebook photos and just like seeing like 2007, and it was a very weird experience. But I'll start with this one. Summer 2004.
Oh, baby.
Fresh out of 7-Eleven. Large Slurpee. We all get on the bus. I'm the last one to get on. As I get on, I trip. I dump my entire Slurpee right in front of the bus driver. The bus driver looks at me and says, "Pick it up." I have to get on my hands and knees and scoop blue raspberry. And from the back of the bus, I hear that cackle mocking me, and I have not been comfortable around women since. All my intimacy issues, my avoidant attachment style, all stemmed from that traumatic experience of being mocked by that. Okay, fine, let's get into fertility.
No, but let's also not forget 2 key pieces to that story.
I did it. Let's hear
it. The bus driver provided you with
Look at me, look into the eyes of the person who traumatized. So what the hell happened?
Oh my god, okay. So I feel like every time I'm about to tell the story kind of from like, you know, the impetus of it all, I like lose my breath a little bit.
So you're anxious? Like right?
No, yeah, it just takes my breath away a little bit.
Yeah.
So I was 23 weeks pregnant.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know how much you know about pregnancy, like
everything.
You're an expert.
No.
Of course you are. So like at 20 weeks, typically, you know, a woman would go for their anatomy scan. It's like this big, exciting ultrasound. You go and you see it. It's like they're checking for everything to do with the baby. You know, all of your key like organs and functions and everything are formed and visible at that time. So, you know, had gone for that scan. Everything was great. Had a like totally normal, healthy pregnancy. Had never been pregnant prior. No miscarriages. Like no D&Cs. Nothing. 23 weeks pregnant, I suffered from an extremely rare uterine rupture. Like, we are talking so unlikely that this would have happened to me. And I don't know, like, how much detail we want to get into.
How much you're comfortable with.
But...
I'll just say, I'm interested in all of it, so if you don't have to worry about, you know, not telling the details for an interest standpoint. If there's something you don't want to go into, don't go into it.
Yeah.
But in terms of telling your story, tell as much of it as you want.
Okay.
Be as detailed as you want.
Yeah, and I think like the details of the rupture are something that I've definitely, like the details around and the story around the whole sort of trauma are something that I've talked about much less, even so with friends and family, because, you know, the past 5 years for us have been so focused on like surrogacy and just like bringing other children her side. So it's weird to kind of go back and talk about the details, but it sort of transpired over the course of 3 days. I felt kind of off on like a Sunday. I went to my doctor on the Monday and was fully reassured that like baby and I were both totally okay and everything was healthy. And then shit hit the fan on that Tuesday. And so I guess, you know, 2 days. Mm-hmm. And it was that Tuesday that I was like exactly 23 weeks pregnant. And the details of the rupture and kind of like when I picture it all unfolding, it's actually super weird because I actually like I see it all happening as though I'm a third party watching.
Yes. Yeah.
And I remember like every single little detail of it.
I just want to say, you know, like a couple of years ago, I remember I posted a little thing on depersonalization. So, like before I did Reels, I wrote stuff. I remember you liking it or like doing something, and I remember thinking, I bet that's what Lauren will experience.
What is that exactly?
Yeah, not to tell you your experience. When you say I pictured it from the third person point of view, like sometimes I'll work with a client who's been raped or sexually abused, and they'll describe the experience of kind of leaving their body and what they can remember it as though it's a movie, and it's kind of like, my theory at least is like when something's so intense and overwhelming and unbelievable, it's like your mind just goes, I'm out of here.
Yes.
And you just kind of it's just dissociation essentially.
100%.
Okay.
That's exactly.
So when you go back and describe it, you're saying that's how it's like, or at the time that's what it was like?
When I go back and describe it, so my memory of it is like I am watching it unfold to myself. And a big part of that too, that's like quite painful, is I see so much of it through Mitch's eyes, my husband, and because he was literally watching it unfold. And like, showed up to our apartment and had paramedics there, and I'm basically like kneeling and in pain on the ground, and he's like, oh my god, what's going on? And also this was the summer of 2020, this was June 2020, and so we were like peak COVID protocol. Like paramedics showed up wearing like hazmat whatever, suits, like masked, and like everything was done at such a glacial pace, like because everything was like, I can't touch this, and can you get this for me? And I'm like, I can't move, like I'm bursting open here, like whatever. So that's like a whole scene in itself.
When you're talking about it now, like, so you said it's like a dream almost, or is there anything happening in your body? Like if you sit here right now talking about it, is your body responding, or is it still kind of? I
still definitely lose my breath a little bit when I talk about it. I think that's also because I'm uncomfortable right now. Like we're, this is like an unusual situation to be in and talk about it. But it takes my breath away. I don't feel anxious. I don't feel sick. That's kind of it. It's like this tightness in my chest.
But it's here right now.
Yeah.
So just say a little more about, just like kind of let your mind go back, if you want to get at any point in this conversation, just stop me. But you're talking about the rupture and the paramedics are there. Just kind of, what do you remember? Anything.
Yeah, I remember it all very vividly. So I was doing like some type of prenatal workout, some exercise that was like safe for pregnancy. And all of a sudden, I just felt this excruciating pain.
Just like that?
Actually, it went from like 0 to 100 in probably a matter of like a couple minutes. I was sort of like, oh, what's that? And then it just escalated. And all of a sudden, I could not breathe and I could not move. And we were living downtown in our apartment at the time. And I texted Mitch, who was at his office, which was in Yaletown, close to where we lived. And I said, like, the pain, it was the similar pain that I had experienced 2 days prior. But now, remember, I'd been reassured from my doctor that everything was okay. So I said, like, the pain is back from Sunday. It's getting worse. Should I call an ambulance? Called an ambulance. And if I could go back and look at those timestamps, I bet it was like just a couple minutes apart. I deleted all those messages. I just couldn't even have that in my phone.
Yeah.
I can't look at photos of myself from that time. I hate seeing myself in the hospital bed, all of that. So I called 911, and like even the ambulance to get there just took forever, to the point that I actually called back again and was like, where is it?
Yeah.
And then I crawled. I didn't know this, that I guess paramedics have a universal buzzer that can get you into any apartment building. I didn't know this, so we had a buzzer at the time, and the phone to like trigger the buzzer was in our bedroom. I was in the living room of our apartment, so I like crawled into the bedroom to get the phone, and I just remember that being like, oh my god, like I just have to get that so that I can get them in.
Yeah.
Got the phone. Anyways, eventually, buzz them in, and like I said, they show up, they're suited up, and they're wearing gloves, and I'm having to get my care card for them, and I'm just like hardly able to move. And at the same time that they arrive, like literally within a matter of minutes, Mitch busts through the door behind them. So he's now walked into this scene in our apartment of like the paramedics leave. He has no idea what the hell's going on. He had tried to call me, in response to my messages, and I couldn't answer. I was just like focusing on getting the buzzer, right? So from there, eventually they loaded me onto the gurney, and I was so hot. Like, I was boiling, and they kept covering me in blankets, and I was like, I'm boiling, like, take these blankets off of me. And I don't know why, I don't know what, like, the medical reason was for that.
I think it's incredible you remember this in such detail, to be honest. I want you to keep going, don't get me wrong, but I would have assumed this is something that's kind of blocked out or it's all a blur, but just the way you're describing it, it's like... There's a lot of moments, to your point, from, I would say, like, June 2020 to when our son, Jay, was born in November 2022, that are a blur. All related to, like, when we get into it, the surrogacy kind of side of things and all of that. But the trauma is, like, embedded, the memory, very vividly. So... anyways, they load me into ambulance, and again, at that time, it was COVID. Mitch couldn't come in the ambulance with me, so he had to follow behind in his car. And we were going up Burrard, up to St. Paul's Hospital, and I remember being like, why is this taking so long? Like, we were at Beach and Burrard, so it's like a few blocks to get to the hospital. I'm like, why is this taking so long? I'm asking the paramedics this, and I'm like, why don't you have your sirens on? Like, I was so aware. I'm like, put on your sirens and, like, fucking get us there. And Mitch is following behind, and the reason for the delay was there was a crane blocking the middle of the road that we were stuck behind for, like, God knows how long. I don't know. Anyways, these are all the things that, you know, minutes wouldn't have changed the outcome. So, you know, that's something that I have, like, learned medically since. Eventually we get to the hospital, and they load me in, and at this point, again, it's like, I'm starting to become so incoherent, but I can see myself. What do you see? Just kind of...
I see myself lying on the bed, and through glass, Mitch is on the other side, and I'm like this, like, just in such pain. I couldn't even breathe. The pain was so bad, because I was internally bleeding at this time, right? And them saying, look, like, your husband's right there, and he was knocking on the glass, like, touching me like this. These are the parts that, like, are very difficult for me to relive, because, again, I'm, like, seeing it through his eyes, and just us being like, what is going on? Like, everything was fine an hour ago, you know?
But why do you think it's harder for you to see it through his eyes than your eyes?
Because I don't know, you're watching something, like, happen to somebody that you love and care about, and you're so helpless. And so was I, but I think it's so scary seeing somebody, you know, go through any type of, like, distress like that.
The word helpless, that's what that kept playing in my mind as you're telling me the story. One with them buzzing and you crawling to get there, and also the crane, and it's just kind of like you're in this situation where who knows what the fuck's going on at the moment.
Totally.
So when you kind of, like, you see it, you can see the image in your mind, you're looking through the glass and seeing yourself. When that comes up, does that make you anxious? Does that make you sad? Are you numb to that?
Numb. Like, disassociate.
And you're not my client, and this is therapy, but just so you know, like, something I might do with a client is, whenever I hear numb, it's a buffer, right? It's something so terrible has happened, or there's some emotional reality that, not consciously, just the human being you can't wake up and get baked goods and have Aaron and Mateo and Lauren over here and live at your normal life if you stay in that felt reality. And so the human being, they become numb to it, right? So someone says, I feel numb. Sometimes I'll just simply ask, if you didn't feel numb, what would you feel? And it's like spontaneously or intuitively, they always have an answer.
Just devastated. Right? It's like self-preservation.
Exactly.
So basically, from there, it was again, everything was very, very fast. And I don't know. I don't know my memory of, like, logging at the time, how realistic, but it felt very, very fast that I was brought in. I see Mitch, and then there is a team of doctors on me. Like, it felt like 20 people in the room on me. And it was like, IV in, catheter in, like, clothes, like, it was like the works on me. And I'm just like, oh my God, like, what is going on? And at this point, my baby was alive. So they had done ultrasound. this, that, and the other. And so that was obviously my number one concern, right? Like, check on baby, baby's good. Okay, this is a me problem, not a him problem. So, I guess eventually, like, they identified that had to have been internal bleeding. Must have been done via ultrasound, right? And so at that point, I could hear them calling for blood. Like, and it's so weird too, because I have just been watching The Pit on, oh my God, it's like just like a new emergency room drama on Crave, like an ER, like a Grey's Anatomy. And it's so weird once you've lived through any type of emergency room experience. I mean, I've lived through a lot of like not scary emergency, just, you know, with my kids being sick or like allergic reactions, whatever. And just watching how the doctors operate and hearing those calls and the teams that come in and like the anesthesiologist and this, you know, whatever. And I'm like, oh my God, like it's just.
I'm surprised you can watch that show, to be honest.
I couldn't.
Yeah. I was talking to a client the other day and he was saying he grew up in a home where his parents are always fighting and bickering and whatnot. And he said, it's the weirdest thing. I'm watching Friends and whenever Ross and Rachel start to fight, I change the channel. Or I change the episode. And so all it takes is two fictional characters who are supposed to be in love just to not get along. And it kind of, even though he knows it's just a TV show and whatnot, it activates something in him where he goes, nah, I don't want to watch this anymore.
Oh yeah. Like Lauren knows, I couldn't watch anything medical related. I couldn't watch anything that had any mention of anything to do with pregnancy, a baby, fertility, nothing. I couldn't watch anything sad. I couldn't listen to certain songs. I couldn't even watch shows. At the time that I was pregnant, I was rewatching Sons of Anarchy, which is like one of my favorite shows of all time. And I couldn't watch that again for like literally until like when Jay was born, my son. That was when the shift for me. It healed me, right? And then I could go back and watch these things again. So to your point, like there was no way that I could watch a medical drama during that time. Because it's sort of like you're just watching your biggest fears unfold, and you're like, I lived that, and then also you become really like paranoid and risk adverse when you've experienced something so rare. So then you start thinking like, what if that happens to you? Like I don't want to hear about weird cases or diseases or things, right? So
can I just go back and so you said. I get there and boom, it happens quickly. Things are happening, IVs are happening, doctors are rushing in, you have some awareness of what's going on, you know, just kind of keep going.
Okay, so so they wheel me back and they go in for the first surgery and it was done, I think at this point, like they had identified there was some type of internal bleeding, some type of rupture. They went in laparoscopically, so I had like 3 incisions in my belly and my abdomen, and they went to try to repair the rupture and therefore obviously like, you know, keep the pregnancy going. And when I was, and then I'm out, right? I don't have any memory of that happening. I don't remember being put under for that surgery either. But then when they took me back out, and I remember coming to in that like, whatever, recovery room, the first thing I asked was, how's my baby? And they said, we're just about to check that. And they bring the ultrasound machine over and this is like an image that's forever imprinted in my mind, is I could see his little feet on the machine. And I just knew. There was just a tone in the room. I'm sure any woman who's experienced any type of loss like that, that's diagnosed, like, you know, with an ultrasound, like you just know. And they all went quiet, and then they had to bring in a different doctor for some reason to tell me that there was no heartbeat. So they brought her in, and she explained it to me, and it was very calm and quiet, and I was completely numb at that point. I was literally, this is what I remember thinking, I have literally just received the worst news that I could ever receive, and it happened. It's happened.
This is my reality.
It happened, This is happening, and now what? And I was just like, just deadpan face. And so then they bring in Mitch. He'd also already heard the news, and this is another, like, just one of those memories that haunts me. He collapsed basically onto me, and was just sobbing. And I just remember, like, still deadpan. Like, I just remember, like, stroking his head and he's on me. And I'm just like, and in that moment, again, no real concept of time or how long that was for, something happened inside of me. And I have said this so many times, I can only describe this, that I started floating away.
Yeah.
And what was physically happening was I had ruptured again. And this was when the significant blood loss happened. So I again felt like flush all over my body, and I just started shouting, something is wrong, something is wrong, something is wrong. They ripped him off of me, and then I remember shouting, get our parents here, get our parents here, get our parents here. Because at this point, COVID, our parents were not allowed to be in the hospital, so Mitch was alone during all of this, the first surgery in the waiting room. And my thought was truly, I'm going to die and he is going to be alone. They explained, we now need to go in and do a C-section to take the baby out, right? Because that's what you have to do. So that was also like, we were processing. So I knew I was going to be going back in for some type of surgery.
Yeah.
So anyways, that surgeon who had explained that to me, is in the room and has me sign some type of document that basically is signing away my uterus in case they had to do a hysterectomy. Thank you. If they could not repair the uterus. And I was like, oh my God. It was like things had just gone from bad to where, like, now my baby is dead. Now I'm going to lose my uterus. I'm not going to be able to have another baby. Like, shows how ignorant too we are to, like, our own, reproductive system, because you don't need to have a uterus to have a baby. Mm-hmm. But anyways, so I'm like, please, I am like begging them. And she's like, this is if it is life or death. Like, if it is life or death, and I'm like obviously I'm going to sign the fucking thing. I don't want to die. And there was this one doctor, there was a few doctors, that this one guy specifically, I remember holding his hand so tight, saying, can I just pause and say, when I talk about these things, I feel so, like, dramatic. Like,
interesting.
It feels so, like, inflated though. Like, when you hear people talk about, like, a near-death experience, and it's like,
fair enough. That's so that thought hasn't crossed my mind in the slightest once. But
I'm always like, oh my God, I feel so dramatic telling this story. Like, get over yourself.
It is dramatic. It is dramatic.
Well,
so you're saying you find your uterus ruptures, you're rushed, boom, boom, Mitch gets there, you find out your child didn't make it, and then in the blink of an eye, it ruptures again, and all of a sudden, put the fact that your child has died to the side. We have to rush you in here to get surgery, and this surgery might mean that you can never have a child again.
Correct. Perfect.
So
yes. So now I'm holding this guy's hand.
I think you have a right to be.
Thank you.
Keep going.
Yeah. So yes, I'm holding this guy's hand so tight, and he is prying my finger. Like, he is literally prying my fingers off, and I'm literally saying, please don't let me die, please don't let me die. And they can't say you're not going to die.
Yeah.
And all he was saying was, you are in the best possible hands.
Yeah.
You are in the best possible hands. And then, I go under. So what then I found out was that was the surgery where I lost about 5 liters of blood. So, that's a lot of blood.
Yeah.
I think that they say the average human has about 5.5 liters of blood in their body. So, that was a lot.
I just had a memory. I kind of hesitate to say it, but I'll say it anyways. In the summer, I was seeing this woman, and we were just lying on her couch looking at Instagram, and I looked at one of your videos, and she's a nurse, and she went, I know that name. And she wasn't there that day, but she knew your name and knew who you were, and her friend was on call.
Oh my God.
And she said, the reason I know that name is because when I got to work, my friend was leaving, and the look on my friend's face.
Oh my God. I wonder what her friend's name was.
Yeah. I might have some of the details wrong, but that was essentially it. And anyways, the point was that her friend, who had been a nurse for years, went like, I've never seen anything fucking like that.
I wonder if it was Heather.
No idea.
Where am I going with this? That was what I was told when I woke up was, I guess I'll just keep telling the story. Yeah. Okay, so then what happened was I woke up in the ICU and Heather was with me. She was one of the, she wasn't a nurse though. She was a doctor, but I think she was doing her, like, I don't know all the doctor terminology. Yeah. Anyways, she was with me and she had stayed with me past her shift, like an extra 12 hours because she said she wanted me to have some consistency. Like, and I mean, I was not even awake. But like, God bless her heart, right? And I'll never, ever, ever forget her. And she knows that. But I woke up in the ICU and the first thing she told me was they were able to save your uterus. And I was like, oh my God, thank God, right? Yeah. And I now know, like, I don't have a baby in my belly anymore. Yeah. But I don't think about where he is. That doesn't, like, cross my mind yet. And physically, like, I was just so incredibly parched, and all I wanted was water. I was so thirsty, and she could just sponge feed me water. These are the pictures, by the way. Like, this is the image when I say, like, I can't even look at them. Like, I think Mitch still has some on his phone, but I do not recognize myself. It is insane. The machinery, the tubes, I had this huge IV in my neck. I had these like compression things on my legs to keep your circulation going. I mean, I looked like death. I literally looked like death.
What do you think would happen if you looked at it? I'm not encouraging you to do it. But like if you were to look at it, what do you think? How do you think your body would react?
Just like icky.
Yeah.
Right? Just like yuck. I don't want to see that.
Yeah.
Okay. So I learned that they've saved my uterus. So I'm like, okay, that's something, right? And then quite quickly, Mitch arrived. Now, what was happening in between my surgery and me waking up? So I think the surgery was about 4 hours. They did allow my mom to come. So they called my mom when I had said, call our parents. And so my mom and Mitch waited through that together. And this is, again, where I sort of see it as a movie because I'm piecing together what's been told to me. And I have a picture of it, but I didn't see it. But I see them sitting there. Yeah. And my mom said, she kept saying to Mitch, I know she's not dying because it's taking so long. They're fixing her. And they just sat there and waited, right? And eventually the surgeon came out and was able to say, like, you know, she's alive, obviously, and we were able to save the uterus and delivered that news. And my mom also says she was, like, immaculate. Like, this woman came out with, like, not an ounce of blood on her. I mean, mind you, I don't know if they changed their coats or whatever, but I've seen a lot of doctors walking around hospital with, like, pretty dirty scrubs. She came out, like, apparently it was, like, this goddess moment. Like, just, you know, all is going to be okay.
Yeah.
So, anyways, carry on. You know, I guess I'm in the ICU. Mitch, they sent them home. They couldn't stay because, again, COVID. And also, what are you going to do? Like, in the ICU, in those critical moments, you can't. Yeah. No, you know, you can't sit by someone's bed. There's no room to walk in the room. It's just machines. So the next morning, when I woke up, he came back in, and we were very quickly greeted by the social worker. Her name was Lana, and she asked us if we wanted to see our baby. So that was the first, like, oh my God, yeah, like, he is somewhere right now. Yeah. Where is he? And this might surprise you, like, my first reaction was, I don't know.
Yeah, no, that doesn't surprise me, yeah.
I was just like, what if it scares me?
Yeah.
What if he's not what I pictured?
Yeah.
And Mitch's first reaction was yes, because he needed to see him to know that he was real, right? Yeah. He wasn't carrying him. He didn't have a belly.
Yeah.
He didn't feel the kicks. And the nurse said, because I was hesitant, she said, he has such a sweet face. And I was like, okay, bring him in and give him to Mitch. And then I'll decide.
Yeah.
And so they wheeled him in, on these little cots. It's just like you would with any newborn baby. I'm gonna try these a week. And they wheel him in, and immediately I just took him on my chest. It was just this very natural, he's my baby, and here he is.
What did you feel, or what were
peace?
Wow.
Like the most peaceful, it was just peaceful. And
go as slow as you need.
Pardon?
I just said go as slow as you need.
Yeah. He was like, honestly, the most perfect little thing I've ever seen. And, again, I kind of, you don't know what to expect, 23 weeks old. And for context, 23 weeks gestation is what I should say. 24 weeks is when a baby is considered viable outside of the womb. So there's certain functions that, even, and this gave me a lot of peace in sort of just like letting go of any type of what ifs, what if they had repaired and he was able to, what if they could have kept him in for 1 week longer? But the likelihood that even if he was at that viability week, he would have faced such significant future health challenges, like what would the quality of life been like, weirdly that also gave me a lot of peace.
So it's like in therapy, I always hear about processing an experience, and I don't even know what the fuck that means. But it's kind of like for me, a client will come in and we'll start talking about something that's happened, and if their body reacts in real time, it's unprocessed. So if they talk about their dad beating them, and you can see it in their physiology, it's still alive, right? That's an unprocessed experience. Where if someone's processed something, they can talk about a horrible, terrible thing. But they talk about it factually, like an awful fact.
Right.
But it's not like their heart rate increases and then
like
they start gulping. That's why I ask questions as you're talking, kind of what's happening in your body, because it just kind of gives some sense of where you're at with that. But
I have not done any work, like by means of therapy, to process this trauma.
Yeah.
I saw a therapist during our surrogacy journey to help sort of coach me through those challenges, which is a whole other topic, which we may or may not have time to get to today. But the trauma, I really did not want to go back into it, for obvious reasons. Like it's painful, it sucks, and it's terrible. And also, grief. There's no way around grief.
No.
You have to just go through grief.
Yeah.
And I felt that I had enough support via friends, family, my husband. Like, I gotta feel this shit. And like, so a therapist I can talk to about it, but like, I'm gonna feel it anyways, and I know how to feel it.
It's funny you say that. I find grief the most difficult thing to work with clients, because someone will come in and they're grieving and they're paying you money and they want it. Get me over this kind of thing. And I'm just kind of going, I don't know what to tell you, man. You just got to talk about it and feel it. And it's like, they're like, but then what am I paying you for? I'm like, I don't know.
Like that is exactly it. Grief is just one of those things. And I say that I'm a professional griever. I haven't had like horrific things happen to me in my life prior to this, but like I've lived through some shit and I've learned how to grieve ideas of the way things were going to go, people that have left my life, so I had like my own tools to kind of go through that. And then I had, an amazing support system and friends that are psychologists and stuff that do give you other methods and things. So anyways, all that to say, the trauma is not something I've unpacked with a professional, like even as much as this.
Yeah. I'm happy to be doing it. I'll tell you this. So my job, I would say, the most distraught I've seen people is a breakup. Just a broken heart, good old fashioned broken heart.
Nothing worse.
And then a year ago, I can't go into too much detail. A year ago, I worked with a man who had lost his son. His son was in his early 20s. He was a bit older than my client. And I had never seen pain like that before. And it was like the guy couldn't even cry. It just his body, just the way he sat, It was like he was in a dream kind of, and he would start a sentence and then kind of trail off and kind of, it was just something I hadn't seen before because I'd never worked with someone who had lost a child. And it just struck me how different it was. Whereas because if someone has a broken heart or something terrible is going on, it's kind of, they're very visceral about it and they can't stop talking about it sort of thing. Whereas this guy was frozen and he was just this sweet older man kind of just in disbelief. He looked like he just could not believe that this was his reality.
Yeah. It's a pain I would truly never ever wish on my worst enemy. And I always say too with Luke, our baby who we named Luke, like any day, what do I say? It's like any day further would have been worse. Any day further along in my pregnancy would have been worse. Any day, further with a child earthside would have been worse. People that lose a baby a few days after they're born, anything. And like the grief of losing a child, I mean, it is honestly just makes me sick to my stomach. It's such an animalistic, visceral response, like that pain. Yeah. And what was so weird was I remember for us, like in the early days following our loss, sort of that summer, I called it like my summer of healing, which I referred to actually like physically healing. And obviously going through, the grief alongside that, but I felt invincible. It was so weird, Aaron, because in certain ways I was so fragile. I was terrified to be alone. I had lost all my independence. I couldn't drive. I could hardly shower by myself. I was terrified of being alone because I thought I was just going to die. Because what had happened to me was so weird. I was like, is another organ going to rupture? Like, what the hell? And so in certain ways I was so fragile, but in certain ways I was like, do not fuck with me. Because let me tell you, I've seen hell. I've survived it. Like, nothing could be worse.
Yeah. The two things, one, that's the second thing you said that's really surprised me. The first one is when you held Luke, that you found peace. I wasn't expecting you to say that. I thought you were going to break that. I thought it was going to be one of the worst moments of your life. We don't have to go back there. I just want to say that that's one time you were talking, and as you're talking, I kind of can't help but anticipate what you're going to say when you said that. I went, holy shit, that's not what I was thinking. And that as well. So you get back. You've had this terrible experience. Physically, you're not helpless, but you know what I mean? But it's like you've been through something and now what? You're invincible, or now you're...
we're exactly. Like it was, I don't know what kind of got us on this path. I think just you were talking about your client that was in that sort of like paralyzed state. It's odd. It's odd. Integrating back into the world after you have experienced significant trauma. And your perspective just changes so fundamentally in a way that has, I will say, since kind of leveled out and gone backwards, which in a way I wish it didn't, but that's, a sign of healing. But when you're in the thick of that grief and like navigating those early days of trauma and loss, I can't speak for other people. I saw things so differently. Like, every person I would pass on the street, I would wonder what they were facing that day. I would, like, a rude store clerk or something, I would think, maybe someone just died in their life.
So it's like you develop more empathy or something like that.
Empathy, and you are operating on this different level. It's like you literally see the world differently. And it reminds me like of in a video game when you get like injured and you like level up and you recharge and now you've got like more armor and you go back out and you're just like, I can do this and I can do this. Like, it's just different. And then everyone you come in contact with, it's sort of like, what's your story?
Do you have a memory of like, if you just kind of let your mind go, do you have like a specific memory that speaks to that?
I actually have this memory of driving, going into this is so random, like an antique store down in like Pemberton somewhere. I think I was with my mom. I don't know what we were looking for. And somebody was doing a terrible job parallel parking in front of us. And I just remember thinking, like, this person's so annoying. But like, maybe they're so distracted because they just received like a cancer diagnosis.
Boys are swimming.
Mateo was ovulating. Oh man. Okay, so we had got June in June because okay, so our families are like our families are very close to each of us, and our families are very, very close with each other. We really truly are like one family, like myself and my family and Mitch's family. And so we all rallied, like everybody just showed up for us. I mean, honestly, for the past 5 years and continue to do so, but particularly like that summer. And I could not go back to our apartment. I could not go back to like the scene of the crime, so to say. So when we left the hospital, we moved into Mitch's parents' house. Yeah. And then my mom moved in there too, because there's enough room for everybody. And that way we could because again, I could not be alone. And that couldn't also all fall on Mitch, because he was going through his own loss and grief, and he needed his own outlets. And so, he couldn't just be like my primary caretaker. So everybody was kind of in it together, all of us. And the moms came up with this plan for us. And it had an acronym. It was the words were apartment. So it was apartment, dog, surrogate. Okay?
ADS.
Yeah, or I don't remember the order, but whatever it was. And so what they wanted us to get a dog, they wanted us to move into a bigger apartment, and they wanted us to pursue surrogacy. Yeah. Now at this point in time, I did not believe surrogacy was not we hadn't gotten there yet in the story.
I didn't even know what it was till your Instagram came along.
Surrogacy?
Yeah, well, I know it is now, but it was off my radar.
Yeah, we're like balancing now. We'll go back. I think we'll go back to the chronological, because it'll explain it. But at this point in time, I was under the impression I was going to be able to get pregnant again, and we were actually like, that's why I was really focused on healing and getting strong, and wanting to be in good shape and healthy, and but the moms and our families were terrified of me being pregnant again, and Mitch too. So they really wanted us to think about surrogacy. So anyways, we got the dog. Yeah. And so we got her, I think it was like 3 weeks after our loss. So it was like fresh. Yeah. And I remember, this is just another one of those memories of going out into the world, going into the dog store, because we were getting this puppy and we had no supplies. So we go down to the dog store, Mitch and I am wearing I'm basically wearing pajamas, like out into the world. Like God knows what my hair looked like. I'm like, no fucks given. Yeah. And we're just going in and buying things and this, that, and the other. And I'm like, God, I wish I could have this confidence just carry through with me, because it's sort of just like, nothing matters. Yeah. Like, I lost my baby. I am living in hell. I'm here to get my dog shit. And like, I don't care what you think of me. Yeah.
Nothing worse can happen. Yeah.
Nothing worse can happen. Judge me all you want. Like, I am invincible.
For the record, I've always felt that way about you, Lauren. So it might have taken you 30 whatever years to figure it out, but I've known it since you were 14 years old.
Oh my God. Yeah. So those are like, that was that weird kind of reintegration into society, and like, as you guys know, and like, other the friends that I saw more socially, I won't say like closer, but friends that I was seeing more, regularly, like, I did not see people. Yeah. I honestly did not see people for 2-3 years, even like the first year after Jay was born.
I saw you in a London Drugs right after Jay was born and waved to you, and you were so in like new baby mode that like you turned the corner, and I was just like,
I swear to
God. I know. That's what I figured. You look great, don't get me wrong, but you look like you had a newborn baby, and I was like, Lauren, no, and then you just turned like that. I was like, I'm not gonna,
like there you go. Yeah, so who knows? I hid from the world. Yeah. So, anyways, going back to kind of like the chronological sequence of events.
I'll just say that. I'll say one thing. I like what you're doing, or what we're doing. It's like you're telling me the chronological order of events, which is important. And then also, I'm asking questions, or you're doing it intuitively. It's like just little memories pop up, right? And I think that's important, because the memories are where the emotion is. And again, this isn't a therapy session. I'm not your therapist. But if we were doing a therapy session, a client will tell you the story, and the story's factual. This happened, and it's important. It's important to tell that. Mm-hmm. And then it's the memories that kind of like are the little boxes of
Absolutely.
If that makes sense. Yeah. Just keep going.
Yeah, okay, so they bring Luke in, they put him on my chest, and I feel that, like, overwhelming feeling of peace. And actually, I can picture the photo, because I have photos of myself with him, and we have photos of him. And I look at peace. Even though I look horrible and like death, I also, like, I'm smiling. And I'm just like, this is where he belongs. Like, this is where he's supposed to be. And it felt so good. And, you know, and...
That's incredible, actually. Like, you had a moment with him.
Oh, yeah.
You had more than a moment with him, but physically, or after the death, after the traumatic incident, you had a moment with him, and like in that moment, that was enough.
It was.
Yeah. Don't let me put words in your mouth, but that's what it seems like you're saying. It's like, I know I have to deal with the pain of this later, and my life's about to be very complicated and difficult, but right now, right here.
That's right.
Yeah.
And actually, you saying that is just another very... it was sort of like words that I lived by. It was really just living the moment, right? In that exact moment with him on my chest, it felt peaceful. But what had just happened was extremely painful, and what we were about to face was extremely scary. But in that moment, it was peaceful. And I held on to that, and I let that guide me through the last 5 years as well with surrogacy, because there's so much unknown, and there's such high stakes at every sort of point. And going through the pregnancies, you know, with both kids, and particularly Jay's, that first pregnancy, just so much fear. Like, it was just like, in this moment, he is good, he's coming, and today is what matters.
Yeah.
Because really, none of us know what tomorrow brings.
Yeah. And you've had an experience, which logically you can tell yourself whatever you want, or the chances are that it's healthy, but you've had a particular lived experience in which it did go wrong.
That's right. That's exactly
right. Do you ever, like, how much... And if this is too personal, stop me, but how much do you think of Luke?
All the time.
Yeah.
All the time. Every day. Multiple times. You know, I have little reminders in our house that to the naked eye, like, you wouldn't even notice. But it's, you know, this is him. That's him. You know, we have his urn. We had to cremate him.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't know that. That was horrible. That is, again, just another thing that I would never, ever, ever wish, you know, on my own worst enemy, is going through that process and... signing the papers and picking him up and the ashes and everything, but we have like a beautiful urn, and it's in our bedroom, and his footprints framed in our bedroom. And every time I look at my kids, they all look like twins. It's wild. They really, really do. And when Jay was born, we looked at him and we were like, oh my god, he looks like Luke. And, you know, Charlie looks like Jay, and so they all look alike. And, but the pain and the sadness changes. And people who have lost babies or children told me that early on. Like, I don't break down and cry. I actually really rarely cry. My good friends know this about me. It takes a lot for me to cry. I think because I'm like, I know what's really worth crying for. But, like, on certain days, not even today, on certain days when the sky is really, really, really blue, I always think of him. I have memories walking up and down Grand Boulevard, because we used to live in Lower Lonsdale, and in like the first year, kind of following our loss, we moved. We moved like our moms wanted, into a bigger place, and because the plan was to move forward, get out of that apartment where that had happened. And I used to walk up and down Grand Boulevard and look at the sky. It would be like this piercing bright blue, and I would just always think of him. So certain things, you know, it's weird.
There's this book, Man's Search for Meaning? No. It's a book, this guy who survived the Holocaust. And so he survived 4 years in Nazi death camps. He talks about this moment. So most as traumatic as it gets, right? Being tortured. He talks about all the inmates or whatever. They're all with the prison guards as well. And they're all walking, and they have frostbite, and they just work 10 hours in the freezing cold. And the sky is setting, the sun is setting, and it's pink. And they all stop and shed a tear. And it was like, from that, his conclusion was you would think that under terrible trauma or terrible things happening, that you'd have no appreciation for beauty or no gratitude. He says it's the complete opposite. Yes. In those conditions, with frostbite, being tortured for 4 years, you actually had a greater capacity to appreciate those sorts of things.
That's also just such another, like, beautiful perspective that can be born from these types of things. I wrote a post, one of my Instagram posts, it was the 1-year anniversary of, I refer to it as Luke's birthday, because at the end of the day, like, he was born, right? But he just wasn't born alive. Yeah. So it was the 1-year anniversary of his birthday, our loss, and Mitch and I went and donated blood. Mitch donates blood every year. Yeah, I actually can't, because the first year I did it, I had a reaction, which, like, I almost fainted. That's what the reaction is when you faint. Yeah. If you've ever donated blood. And it was just so reminiscent of, you know, my experience actually, like, bleeding out. Yeah. And I was really sick. It took, like, a good couple hours for me to recover. Yeah, so I don't donate anymore. But Mitch does every year in Luke's honor. Anyways, I had posted and I had said something along the lines of, like, I just feel everything more deeply. Yeah. So you feel joy. Yes. And you feel sorrow. Everything is deeper.
Well, it's cool. What I'm loving about this conversation, a lot of things, but, like, I know a little bit of grief in life, but not that much. But I know it intellectually at being a therapist, right? I can learn about, you've lived it, so you actually know it, you're the expert. But there's this therapist I like who's a grief expert. He's a sign, or a line, he says, the deeper the grief, the deeper the joy. Yes. Right? Because I think what depression is shutting down of emotions. Right?
Yes,
like,
that's right.
Depression isn't, I'm so sad. Sadness is a part of it, but it's a numbing. It's your nothing. Emotional range being shut down, you know. But grief, you tell me, you know better than me, seems to burst open your emotional range. Yes. So you experience the greatest pain you'll ever experience in your entire life. Yes. But it's like you're open and alive to life.
That is so well said. Another quote that was shared with me is, grief is just love with nowhere to go. Yeah. And that is the best explanation of grief that I've ever heard. Yeah. And so you need to pour that love into something. So you pour it into your people. Yeah. You pour it into your puppy. Yeah. Like, into your children.
How long did it take you? So it's kind of like you're saying, this terrible thing happened. Not but I gained from it, but and that you're looking back on it, I gained a different perspective. There are good things that emerge. How long did it take you to get to that place where you could see anything good in it whatsoever?
Very quickly.
Interesting.
If I'm being
honest. That's another thing. That's another.
Yeah, very quickly. So Mitch and I always, people are very sensitive to certain things when they've experienced grief or loss or pain. You know, it could be worse, or look on the bright side. You know, these types of things. And actually, we're big, like, it could be worse, people.
Yeah, okay.
And look on the bright side, like, I'm alive. Yeah. And, you know, they saved my uterus. And we have a family that's loving and supportive, that we can, you know, move into the house and get out of our apartment. Yeah. You know, a lot of people don't have that access to that and that luxury. Yeah. And they go through these types of things completely alone. Yeah. And, you know, it could have been a lot better. Like, our baby could have survived, and it could have not been COVID, and we could have had family visit us in the hospital that we were in for 7 days. And Jesus, I wish it didn't happen. Yeah. But we were immediately able to look on the bright side. And this brings us actually a perfect segue. Into being told that I could get pregnant again. Okay. So that was another huge win. And again, I feel like I keep referencing these medical shows, but
go for it. I
in The Pit, there was one storyline where actually parents lost their son to a drug overdose, okay? And he was brain dead, and the doctors knew that. But they gave the parents false hope and said, we're going to run a few more tests. Yeah. And that was so that the parents could have time to process and come to terms with the fact that he might not wake up before just, like, he's brain dead and it's over. And I wonder, because the doctors, apparently it was unanimous that the team that had operated on me and, you know, been with us from start to finish, apparently it was unanimous that they thought that I could get pregnant again as early as 6 months later, which was around that following December. And people go, like, were you annoyed? Because that wasn't the case. I keep touching my microphone, hopefully it's not messing up the sound. And I'm like, no, because I actually think I would have died. I think I would have.
How'd you got pregnant?
Yeah. Or no, sorry. Like, if they had said that I couldn't.
I see.
And now we've lost our baby. Yeah. And now I can't get pregnant. It would have been too much. Yeah. To cope. Yeah. And I wonder if they intentionally gave us false hope or not. That's that's just something new. Like since watching this episode, I'm like, I wonder.
Yeah.
Because it was very clear that when we were referred to the specialists at maternal fetal medicine, who would have been monitoring a future pregnancy, it was very clear in their eyes that I could never get pregnant again safely. Yeah. So, yeah. I don't know.
You can reference all the shows you want. It's actually true. Like, when I talk to clients, I'll reference TV shows or movies all the time because we get things, information better through story. It clicks more with stories, right? So I'll give you an example. When you were talking about moving apartments, what my brain automatically did was think about Forrest Gump.
Oh.
You remember Forrest Gump? There's a scene where Jenny was abused as a child, and she goes back to her childhood home, and she freaks out and starts throwing rocks at it and just gets to the ground and starts bawling her eyes out and crying. It's like, so she goes and she lives her life and becomes an adult, and she's disconnected from that trauma. But as soon as you put her back in the same environment where she sees the image of where the trauma took place, or in your apartment where the horrible scene took place, all that emotion pops up.
Yeah. And I mean, even like with the apartment, I actually have a really hard time even, it's sort of sad because we lived there for a long time. I lived in that apartment for almost 10 years. I like really don't even like thinking about the good times in that apartment. It's just tainted. And that kind of entire neighborhood, even sometimes being on the seawall down there, I just associate it with being pregnant and then losing my baby. So I'm like, I don't...
Do you think... I'm not saying you should or shouldn't or trying to persuade you, but do you think you would ever try to look at some of those pictures or try to go walk around there?
I have. We've definitely been back there.
Or the pictures then. How about the pictures,
of myself?
Of you being in the hospital at that time. The ones you say that that feeling comes. Yeah, no, fair enough. And I'm not.
I look at pictures of Luke all the time.
Yeah.
I have an album on my phone that's Luke, and it's pictures of him. And pictures of me pregnant, and like our sonograms and things like that, and his cremation and stuff. We did capture everything. And one thing I'll share in case there is anybody who's ends up listening to this or watching this that loses a baby is we were told that the hospitals take photos of all of the babies that are stillborn because a lot of parents don't want to. And then they regret it and they change their minds. And so the hospital, apparently, they have like piles of photos. So if you ever, somebody, again, ever miss that opportunity, those photos might exist. I connected with one woman, a friend of a friend, really early on, who had lost her twins at 20 weeks. And she was sort of like my inspiration because I was talking to her. She was still pretty fresh in it. Like it may have been like 6 months to a year out of her loss, and she didn't have another baby yet. She was going through the process of getting pregnant at the time, but she was in a good place, is what I would say. Like as good as you can be. And that's always what I wanted to connect with. And I didn't want to connect with people that were in a bad place because I didn't want to be in a bad place. And it's even interesting hearing you talk about depression because I look back and I wonder, like, was I depressed? But I did always feel really intense emotion. I felt joy. We laughed so much. Shocker.
No, but it actually, the more, because when I came here, I didn't know the story, but I had assumptions. And the more you talk, the more I realize how wrong most of my assumptions are.
Cool, actually.
It is very cool. And that's kind of,
Yeah, I felt still immense periods of joy, even in those very early days following the trauma. So like I said, we moved into my in-laws' house, and everyone had just rallied, right? And we, like, this might sound so strange. Again, it's just maybe just so different than what you would have expected, but we would have family dinners every night. We would sit down at the table. I mean, I couldn't eat, I had no appetite, but they would try to like force me to eat as much as I could. We'd sit at the table though. Wine was cracked and life was celebrated. And it was this weird, is the word juxtaposition of like death and life. Because Luke had died, but I had lived. And we had our friends come visit, and we would cry and we would laugh and we would eat.
So that's your emotional range, being open like that.
That's right.
Yeah.
And we would share pictures, if they were open. And I mean, look, it wasn't sunshine and rainbows. Like, they'd come over and I would be like a shell of a human being on the couch. Mm-hmm. But then we would laugh about something. Mm-hmm. And, and going back to the hospital. So we spent 7 days there. Yeah. And 7 days in the maternity ward is actually where we had to be. It was just the best place for us, where they could provide the best recovery care. And because I had to learn to walk, it was like the whole thing. What I should say too is in that second surgery, it was a C-section. So I ended up with a lateral C-section. So most women in a planned C-section would end up with a horizontal, right? Very low on your abdomen. But I was basically sliced probably an inch below my belly button down, because it was just such an emergency. They needed to open me up and figure out what was going on. So I was really in a lot of pain, obviously, and physically, my mobility was quite limited. Somebody's phone is ringing.
Yeah, it's an emergency alert.
Is it yours?
No, it's all of ours.
It's an Amber Alert.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say, is it an earthquake?
Live earthquake on the HAT
guys,
podcast.
I think there was another earthquake yesterday.
Yeah.
Or that
first earthquake, I was in the sauna.
I was so scared.
I was in the sauna relaxing and just shook a little bit. I went, what the hell is that?
Oh my God.
Some old guys next to me. Like, okay.
I was terrified. Me and Charlie were here in June, and it was the house shook.
Lauren, are you familiar with the term sandbagger?
Yeah.
You're a sandbagger in a podcast. Lauren's like, oh, I'm so nervous. I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to be. I'm never talking in front of a microphone. I'm never talking in front of a microphone.
She's just actually brilliant.
Yeah.
This is when the interviewee becomes an interviewer. It's the Hello podcast now.
Yeah, we can do a collaboration.
AJT is going down.
Don't take us.
When we were in the hospital, we were there for 7 days, so I was recovering, yada yada. We laughed so hard, so we would FaceTime. So my brother and his wife flew in from Hong Kong.
Yeah.
This was another moment, actually. This is a pivotal moment. I remember when I woke up in the ICU and Mitch joined me, and he had said, your brother's on the way. And I just broke again, because I just knew it's that bad, that my brother has now had to fly in from Hong Kong, quarantine for 2 straight weeks in a tiny 400 square foot apartment downtown, him and his wife. Yeah. They had their tiny little balcony that they could go outside for fresh air, just so that we could see them. And we're so, all of us, risk adverse, right? Yeah. Because again, we have just experienced such a rare thing. And at this time, people were still a little skeptical of COVID, and we're not going to dive into that, but it was I'm not going to be the one that gets that sick. I'm like, no, I am. Yeah. I'm going to be the one that dies from COVID. Stay the fuck away from me. Yeah. I was very, very afraid of seeing people during that time. So anyways, they did the proper quarantine, but we FaceTimed with them, often throughout the day. Mitch and I would, FaceTime with them, because they, what are they doing? We would just laugh about, random shit, the hospital food was funny. You find things that are funny. Yeah. And at one point, I laughed so hard, I literally ripped a stitch.
That's what, again, not to keep bringing up his book, but that's what he talked about too. He talked about the laughter in the concentration camps. Just the ability for human beings in the worst conditions, going through the worst things imaginable, to still laugh with one another, to still appreciate the sunset, to still experience connection or whatever.
Yes. Laughter is the best medicine.
And you have the best laugh.
You're welcome. Yeah, it's wild how that really carries you through. And our friends were so incredible. They sent stuff. They showed up at our windows. They put flowers on the ground so we could see them. Yeah. I mean, honestly, our friends just showed up, and those things you just never, ever, ever forget, right?
Did you, with surrogacy, was that something right away you got to and were on it?
Yeah, so that brings us to our next point. So, so early on, like I said, we were told that I could get pregnant again. And we were referred to maternal fetal medicine out of BC Women's Hospital. So all of this had happened at St. Paul's Hospital. We were referred to BC Women's. These are specialists in high-risk pregnancies. And we had an appointment there that following October. It was right around Halloween. And we were under the impression that they were going to tell us how they would monitor my pregnancy. But I was very, very anxious leading up to that appointment. Yeah. I did not know. I was not confident, about what was going to happen. And We walked in, and it was a very, very rude awakening. The doctor sat down with us. He was a guy, probably like late 30s, early 40s, really terrible bedside manner. And he basically right off the bat was like, do you know why you're here? And we're like, well, to understand how you can monitor me if I get pregnant again, right? And he was kind of like, that's, I don't remember the exact words he used, but like that wasn't an option. And that the team had done extensive research, and that a case such as mine had only been documented 30 times in the history of medical science. So when I say that, it's important to note, like, a woman my age, a woman with no prior pregnancies, a woman with no prior C-sections, a woman with no prior abortions, that's like a D&C or a miscarriage, which I had none of, right? So other women have maybe experienced a uterine rupture, but they have had other, experience other things that would be more likely to lead to that. So it was completely unlikely. They'd be monitoring me blind, and it was very high likelihood that the same thing would happen, or worse, that I would die. Okay. So talk about being risk averse. Mitch and I look at each other. We've just come out of this horrific experience, and we're like, well, we're not getting pregnant. Like, that's not happening. Yeah. And he basically said, you've got three options. You could not have children, which was not an option for us. Yeah. You can adopt, which is going to be, this is what he was saying to us, really expensive and take a lot of time. Or you can pursue surrogacy, which is really expensive and going to take a lot of time. And we were like, well, fuck you, buddy, you know? And again, kind of still had that air about, I can say for myself, I can't speak for Mitch, but I was kind of like, don't fuck with me, let me show you.
You're like, this is going to happen.
This is going to happen.
My destiny, or this is what,
This is going to happen. And boy, do I wish that I could show, here I am with my two healthy children, less than how many years later, right? Yeah. So, we looked at each other. We said, surrogacy is going to be it. We walked out of there. Our hearts broke again for the second time. It was the second worst day of our lives. We spent that whole day crying, walking on the seawall, processing it, informing our friends and family. And then from that day, we went back to our apartment, and I wrote a letter in that very raw state to any woman or person in my life that could, offer any insight into the world of surrogacy, the world of IVF, and basically was like, if you know anyone that can help, please pass this letter on to them, or, please share their information with me. And when I say I shamelessly sent that to literally any woman that had ever entered in my life in adulthood in the past, 10 years, I sent it to them. Yeah. And I just put it out there. And I just remember thinking, I can do anything for my kids, because it was so uncomfortable. But yeah, we did. And Mitch did too. He sent it to, everybody in his life, coworkers, friends of friends, sisters of friends.
It's like, I won't be denied kind of thing.
Yeah.
You have this experience, you're 23 weeks pregnant, all goes wrong, and you're going, no, this is happening.
This is happening. Someone's going to help us. Yeah. Someone's going to know someone that can help us. Yeah. And I don't think I slept or ate for about a week following that day. And I researched the hell out of everything to do with IVF, every option of a fertility clinic, everything to do with surrogacy, every surrogacy agency. I had, Google Docs, left, right, and center, and spreadsheets, and then, I'm a project manager also, that's what I do for work, and so I just project manage the shit out of this. Yeah. And we started receiving responses. This influx of people wanting to help. Yeah. I know someone who used a surrogate. I went through IVF. Here's their number. This is their name. So I was tracking these people's names and phone numbers and trying to, write a note of how did I get this person's number? Oh, it's Aaron's sister's coworker from 5 years ago. So that when I reached out, I knew who they were. Yeah. And I just started scheduling calls with these people and these agencies, and it just snowballed. And before you know it, we had an appointment booked at a fertility clinic to start IVF. We had even someone come forward and say that they wanted to be our surrogate in that first week.
Oh, I didn't know this part of the story.
Mm-hmm, yeah. We did 2 uterine biopsies on her. She had to undergo a polypectomy. This is jargon I'm throwing out. It's all nuance. So tell me.
I know nothing about what you're talking about, but I still get it.
Yeah, whatever. This woman went through a lot of shit to try to get pregnant. Yeah. And we went through a total of 4 embryos. And that is a lot. Yeah. And that is devastating because with every transfer, it's another loss. Yeah. And it's another baby that's not born. And it's an embryo that you're thinking, shit, my embryos, they're declining. Yeah. So anyways, fast forward, eventually that journey with that woman had to end. There was just no answer as to why it wasn't working. And Sasha, our surrogate that birthed both of our kids, her and I had been talking behind the scenes about everything that had been going on. She was a friend and someone that had supported me.
Has she done surrogacy before?
No.
Wow.
She had 4 children of her own.
Yeah.
She loves being pregnant.
Wow.
She is, I call her like an earth mama, but her personality is not an earth mama. She is one of the most entertaining, hilarious.
Seems cool. I don't know her. I just see her on
cool.
Instagram. Cool is a word to describe her based on what I've seen on Instagram.
She's a unicorn. Yeah. She is just unlike anyone I've ever known. Yeah. But yeah, when it comes to birth and being pregnant, she's kind of an earth mama. Like natural births and carries pregnancies beautifully. And she actually really grieved the idea of not being pregnant again after they had their 4th kid because they were done. Yeah. And comes from a large family. I think she would have had more, but they were like, I think her husband, they were like, we're going to stick with 4. So she had just had her baby in August, her last daughter in August following our loss in June. And we chatted early on when I found out that I needed a surrogate, but the timing wasn't right. And so we proceeded with this other woman. And after a couple of failed transfers, her and I were kind of like chatting again. She's like, I think we should sit down and talk. And that was actually the 1-year anniversary of losing Luke. So that was that June of 2021. Yes. Her and I started chatting. And and then we went through all the protocol to kind of get her up and running for surrogacy and, had some speed bumps there. But then our first transfer with her took, and that was Jay. And he was born in November.
Okay, slow down, Lauren.
I'm talking too fast.
No, I don't mean it like that. I just mean you're getting to not the best part. It's all the best part. All right, Lauren, now what are we going to talk about? Where are we going?
What were we talking about?
I don't know. You're in charge. You're leading this thing. Right. You're in your element.
We were talking about surrogacy. Sasha, Jay being born, and then you told me to slow down. And then I asked if you guys were still interested, and then we all had to pee.
But I tell you to slow down. When did I tell you to slow down?
Because you said we're getting to the good part.
Oh, yeah. No, you just were like, yeah, and then I had a kid. It was all good.
I also started talking.
We lived happily ever after. No, you didn't. You're killing it. You just got self-conscious. I've been told that in these podcasts I slouch.
You do. You're all about the nose. It's like
the nose. It's just bad posture. Anyways.
You asked me like how Sasha entered the picture. So we started working with Sasha. We started chatting that June 2021. And God, there's so much to say about surrogacy. Like, what do you want to know about surrogacy?
What is it like for another human being to be carrying your child?
Yeah, great question.
I mean, that
Here's
seems like...
thing.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got a great answer for you.
Yeah.
It was... this is going to be another like, whoa, I didn't think you were going to say that.
Yeah.
It was great.
Yeah.
Because I was so afraid of being pregnant.
Yeah.
So having that confidence that, my baby was safe in somebody else's body and loved for and cared for, because Sasha's just the absolute best.
Did you feel like connected to the child though? Like
I did, and I'll preface, or not preface, but like I'll say that also, I'm sure there was an element of like self, like protection, like I would not have. How do I say this? There was no way that I was going to be like excited and believe that he was here until he was born.
Yeah.
So yes, I was connected in a way that I knew he was coming, but I think whether I was pregnant or she was pregnant, there would have been that.
It's kind of like the numbness you were talking about. Not quite the same thing, but just kind of a way to
a little distance.
Yeah.
Like, are you really coming?
Yeah.
And the other thing is, like I've said, it would be similar to, when you have a baby one day, you're not going to be the one that's pregnant.
Really good point.
Yeah. So, and it's totally normal, right?
That's hilarious. Yeah. That thought never would have crossed my mind.
Yeah. It's just like the other partner in the relationship that isn't pregnant.
Yeah.
And,
but there's that incredible video of you when you get to hold your baby for the first time.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yes. Jay, you're talking about.
I think so. There was one.
Video. Yeah, I think it's Jay, because I posted like his birth video online. So the other thing that happened with Jay's pregnancy was, of course, he had a very rare condition called valimentous cord insertion. Okay, so this is when the umbilical cord, and I'm not a doctor, please preface it with that, is the vessels at the base of the cord are left exposed. They're not covered in this stuff called Horton's jelly that basically protects the vessels from rupture, a word that we love to hear, a buzzword for me. And so he was diagnosed with that, and that then deemed his pregnancy high risk. So now...
When did you find that out?
Like how far? At the 20-week ultrasound.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. So at our anatomy scan. And so then Sasha, as the patient, right, was referred to maternal fetal medicine. And she was very closely monitored for the duration of her pregnancy. And that was just incredibly anxiety-inducing. And actually,
kind of like, here we go again.
And, you know, every call that I had with a doctor to try to understand about, you know, valimentus and the risks associated with it, which, by the way, are catastrophic. If something happens, it's catastrophic, a rupture. There's no, like, gray zone with it. It's either they're going to die or they're not. And, you know, there's certain things you can do to mitigate the risk upon delivery, like a C-section, if the vessels are in a certain position, which in our case they weren't, so we didn't need to, the C-section wouldn't have done anything for the valimentus in that case. But it's sort of one of those things that you're just like, well, shit, you know, we've got this to deal with, and let's hope for the best, right? And again, you know, it's very rare that something's going to go wrong, but
you know, I'm going to sound so stupid saying this, and they'll say it anyways. Like, I just, growing up, assumed women just got pregnant. And then I think what happened to you, again, I didn't know much.
Yeah.
After that, people I know, not too well, it's like you heard more and more stories of people, and it was just like, holy shit, this isn't something that just happens, you know, effortlessly. And,
Absolutely. And, you know, I think that there's a combination of our age and also that it's just becoming less taboo to talk about.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I swear, everyone under the sun has gone through IVF.
Yeah.
Like, it just seems that anyone that I talk to, you know, or has had some type of fertility struggle.
Yeah.
And it becomes more prevalent the older that we get and the longer that people wait to have children. You know, a lot of women are choosing to take, like, their fertility into their own hands and preserve their fertility with, like, egg freezing and things like that. But it is interesting, right? And even for men, like, you don't really know, you know, until you get, like, your swimmer's jacket and everything's all good. So
I think it's harder for women, though.
It's definitely
there's more
harder
fear
for women,
you know.
Yeah, I think, like, the pressure falls on the women more. That's definitely a generalization that we could make.
But see, I work with a lot of women in their 30s, and I'd say, there's a lot of fear there around. You're talking about something different, like having a partner and being pregnant and whatnot. I see it more as it's kind of like a woman will go through a breakup, and she not only is grieving the loss of that relationship, but now the fear of, holy fuck, I might never become a mom pops up. So it's like she's having two emotional experiences of one. Or that fear will cause them to stay in a relationship that they know is unhealthy or unfulfilling.
Absolutely.
Or, you know, go chasing people that aren't right for them or that sort of thing. But men like me and Mateo over here, we can have kids when we're 50 if we want it. You know, it's not ideal, but we kind of don't have to grow up yet if we don't want to.
You don't have to settle.
It's
very true. And I think, like, that was a big thing too. Like, less so when we first lost Luke, but when I then, you know, received the news, like, that I couldn't get pregnant, it's like this entire, you know, your entire life trajectory has now changed. Mm-hmm. And am I going to have kids? And yes, as much as I was like, you watch me, I'm going to, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And really, I can say, I really refuse to believe in any other reality.
Yeah. That's what I'm getting from you. Or like there's like a strength to your resiliency that I knew was there. I'm not just you know, trying to pump your ego here, but that's what's coming across in this conversation. I really thought this conversation was going to go differently.
That's so cool.
You know, now you might, you know, be repressing certain parts of it, or there are certain aspects.
Yeah.
Push back on this. Don't let me convince you. You know,
I'm being pretty honest.
Yeah. I'm just saying. No, I know you are. I'm just saying there are parts where you probably go, okay, no, I'm not looking at the pictures because fuck it. Why bother?
Totally.
You know, that sort of thing.
Yes.
But there's kind of a strength or resilience, or like I don't know, the word realistic's coming up. I don't know why.
That's a good, you know what, that is a really good word.
Realist.
I think realist. It's sort of like, you have now received this news and what are you going to do with it?
Yeah.
And like, I can sit down and cry every day, and man, I cried a lot.
Yeah.
But what are you going to do with it? And the entire healing and recovery, again, like I'll just say until Jay was born, because after Jay was born, things shifted.
Yeah.
But up until he was born, so really that like year and a half, 2 years, no wait, what would that be? I can't think of the math. But anyways, up until November 2022, every month had a focus for me. So everything I like, again, this is almost like that project management sort of like approach, but everything really had a phase. It was like, phase 1 was physical recovery. Like phase 2 was find the clinic. Phase 3 was IVF. Phase 4 was, transfers.
But people really struggle with that.
She might need her bottle.
A bottle?
Yeah.
Let's get her. You can even bring her in if you want.
Yeah, you can.
Or like,
I can hold
you
her
could
if you
hold
want.
her.
Try, see if she'll take the bottle from you, and then it's right there, Mateo, on the table.
Ah, let's look here.
You can, if you sit down like in that chair, and then you can kind of just like lean her on, like here, let me set her up.
I'm working with a lot of people, especially right now. There's something they want, or a situation, or a person they want, and they're clinging to it. And I've done this many times in my life. I'm not above this, but I'm just saying they can't let go. They can't accept the reality they're in, and they know they need to anyway, sort of thing. But it's just like they're just clinging to this person who doesn't want them, or they're clinging to this experience that they thought was going to go this way, and then it didn't go this way. So you're coming in here and you're telling me kind of, okay, stage 1, and so it's like you have this ability to kind of, like you said, you cried and you had your tough times, of course, but you seem to have this ability to kind of focus in on, I don't know what you put it into words.
I think I was just so like proactive in moving forward.
Yeah.
And I also, this is an interesting thing that I am aware about, like I'm aware of this about myself. I actually can let go really easily.
That's what it seems like.
So it's I don't know why.
I'm saying that's probably the number one thing people can't do that they come to therapy. Because as a therapist, that's what I get confronted with. I need help letting go of this. How do I do it? I go, I don't fucking know.
Right.
You can pay attention to when you're not letting go of something, but how to actually go in there and internally let go of something.
Yeah. It's like, I don't know what it is either, but even, relationships, like my friends would laugh at this because it was like I'd break up, go through a breakup, and like that's it.
Yeah.
Like
you're done.
Like, I'm like, dude, unfollow him, delete his number. Yeah. Like why? Yeah. Right? And I don't know why I'm like that. It just is the way that I am.
But what's cool, I find, is people's qualities that are like what make them or most impressive about them. Usually, they're so embodied in that person that they can't even really say much about it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's like you just are.
Mateo's funny. Mateo's funny in his bones and his soul. I bet you Mateo couldn't do it.
Why are you funny?
Like Mateo couldn't articulate maybe he could correct me, Mateo, but articulate the process by which he's a funny person in the world. It's just in him kind of thing. And so
that's right.
Yeah.
I think it makes it like really easy for me to accept that news and that pivot of my life, right? And then like move on to the next.
Yeah.
And that gave me a huge focus too, which helps with the grief because you've got something to like pour that energy into, right? Again, like my future children.
Yeah.
So it was just like this very phased, very direct approach to kind of everything that we were doing to get us to that next step.
Were you scared to be a mom?
No, not at all.
That's awesome.
Oh, no.
Yeah, you're very unique. Every mom you talk to is like, I'm terrified, I'm going to fuck up my kid. Lauren's like, I got this shit.
I was
ruptured uterus, surrogacy, doesn't matter, I got it. It's just going to be a cakewalk.
Let me tell you, that shit was hard. Going through surrogacy was so hard. Because there were moments, as strong as I sound now talking about it, there were totally moments where I started to lose hope. Like after that first year, I was just like, oh my God, is this not going to work?
Yeah.
But then again, really believing, I'm like, here's the thing too. It's sort of like, how much are you willing to put into it? if it took 5 years, I wouldn't have stopped.
Yeah.
If it took selling every single thing we owned, I wouldn't have stopped.
Yeah.
You know, like, so yeah, it's that part too. But no, being a mom, like, that has and is my calling.
Yeah.
And like 100% zero doubt.
Yeah, it seems like that.
Yeah, zero fear. And
So, like, what's life like when you find your calling, or when you're doing the thing that you feel like you're supposed to be doing, right? You are doing it. It's kind of a weird question, but just
yeah, it's
answer it.
a great question. I think again, it's like peace.
Yeah. That's very simple, or like brings it full circle almost kind of thing.
Yeah, it's peace. Like when Jay was born, it was this big exhale.